Welcome to Delcen Media, the channel for industry leaders. Today, we are pleased to present an exclusive interview with former FDA commissioner, an expert in the food industry, influencer and change maker Frank Yiannas.
Frank, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us on this program. We'll have a small talk. It's a small interview that we will do about you, your experience, and what your view is about the industry. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to it.
So Frank, you've worked 20 or more than 20 years in Disney. You've foreseen all the safety and food safety programs at Disney. You've developed or helped develop those programs. You've worked with culture. Then you moved to Walmart probably for about a decade. Is that right?
10 years.
And then after Walmart, you were participating as the head of the FDA in the United States. So why that change? Why did you decided, or what path led you to changing from the private industry to the public service?
Well, that's a great question. I did it occasionally. People want to know, well, my goodness, you worked in the private sector for 30 years, working for two global brands that are pretty prestigious. Why wait to move? Why go from private to public? And I would say, even when I worked at Walmart, Walmart is the world's largest retailer. In the U.S. alone, they had about 25% market share. That means that one out of every $4 spent on food in the United States was spent in a Walmart store. And even though I felt, we could have good impact there in improving and creating a safer and smarter and sustainable food system, at the end of the day, we were serving 140 million customers a week in a big country, but 140 million. When I moved from Walmart to FDA, the scale and the ability to have impact was a little bit greater. Right. One of the most prestigious regulatory agencies in the world. And I like to say I went from serving 140 million customers a week to about 348, 350 million Americans on a weekly basis. But all my experiences have been great, but it was the idea that you could serve more people working in government. And I did that because I felt it was a calling, and I'm grateful that I did. But the one thing I want to emphasize to your audience is it doesn't matter where you're at, what seat you're in, what company you work for, how big or small. It doesn't matter if you're the private section. It doesn't matter if you're in the public sector. The reality is you can make a difference. Wherever you are, you can make a difference. And the reality is that we all have to work together to get better.
So with all of this experience that you came through working both in the private sector, in the public sector, with two very different views on how to manage people and creating a system that can help the final customer. Mm-hmm. What do you think we can do as an industry to help elevate the level of education that the final consumer has on food safety? Because it's something that if you ask any person in the street, probably they will not know what food safety is, but it's something that involves them in every way.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The reality is many consumers don't think about it too much until they have a problem, or unless they have a problem. And in some respects, retailers and food manufacturers don't want them to worry when they pick up their brand. Generally, the industry says we're not competing on food safety, but the consumer plays a critical role. And I think increasingly it will play a more important role in so many respects. Let me just give you one example. We say food safety is a shared responsibility. And I always say it starts on the farm, but it ends in the home.
Right.
And so consumers, despite the fact that we're working really hard to try to reduce the prevalence of pathogens of food products early in the production chain, there's still preparation and handling that occurs in the home. So we have to raise awareness and we have to educate consumers on safe food handling practices, and we have to do a better job at that. Because the reality is, when my parents were growing up, they learned a lot of food preparation techniques in the home, but today many of the younger generation is far removed from food production, and so food magically shows up at the table or when they place an order. So we have to focus on consumer education. But I think probably the biggest thing for me is that the paradigm and who is responsible for food safety is changing. It used to be that regulators had a lot of influence, right? But the balance between regulators and consumer desires and consumer expectations is shifting a little. And in this new interconnected digital world that we live in, the consumer is the boss and the consumer is the king. So we need to continue to educate consumers on appropriate food production practices, what are responsible sourcing methods, are companies behaving in a responsible and sustainable way, and let the consumers choose. I think when we empower consumers, that's a good thing. And consumers stating that you've got to give them great value, you've got to give them a great price. But consumers will increasingly want to know about these types of things, food safety and sustainability, et cetera. And I saw that in my career at Walmart. The first couple of years at Walmart, consumers were very concerned about everyday low prices.
Right.
When I left 10 years ago, they wanted to know more about the food. Where was it produced? Was it sustainable? And so this transition is happening in a very accelerated way.
Yeah, it seems like this trend is growing so fast that consumers, with all the access to social media, they want to know how everything is produced, if it's produced safely. And as you mentioned, it's a matter not only of regulators, not only a matter of companies, it's about people, right? It's also a matter of culture. Yep. And you are an expert in culture. You work developing culture programs for your companies. You've wrote books about it as well. Is there any recommendations you can give to the sector, the industry, probably to specific organizations or even to customers to improve this culture on food safety and quality?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that question because I've worked on this concept of food safety culture my entire career, in the private sector, and even at FDA, I made it a central tenet of the new era of smarter food safety, which is the vision and plan that the FDA is using to modernize their food safety efforts for the next decade. Let me begin by telling you why I think it's so important. And I want your audience to know, when we talk about food safety culture, we're not talking about a communication plan. We're not talking about a tagline. We're not talking about a slogan. We're talking about a legitimate subset of our profession that really takes into account human behavior and principles of organizational culture and organizational dynamics, so that everybody involved is responsible for food safety, not just accountable for food safety. But why did this become important to me early in my career? And I suspect many of your audience members have the same feeling, is we can write great HACCP plans. We can write the best policies in government. You can write the best rules. But if those rules and policies and HACCP plans are not put into practice by people, I like to say they're completely useless. They're not worth the paper that they're written on or the bytes that we're using to digitize them. And increasingly, I think many professionals realize that just mastering the food sciences alone can't make you successful in food safety. And you have to, because food is still very much a human endeavor.
Yep.
It's not all automated. You have to be able to influence human behavior for the better, to do the types of things, to do the right actions the right way every day, even when no one is looking. And so I embarked on this journey and tried to develop it as a subset of our profession. I've written 2 books. I teach a course at Michigan State University. But I would say the couple of things that I need the industry at large and organizations that are listening to do is, number one, really understand the difference between food safety culture and a slogan. It is a science. So I want listeners to be students of food safety culture.
Yes.
There's an emerging field of science. At FDA, we just published a study where we looked at all the publications and studies done on food safety culture. It's a growing body. You can find it on the FDA website. I need you to convince your leaders that this is really important to the organization, that it's not just about complying with rules and regulations. That's important. But what's even better is we're going to do food safety because we care about our consumers and we're going to take the right actions every day. So work in your organizations and across an industry to make food safety part of the values and belief system as opposed to just complying with regulations. And those are very different. I would say another thing that folks need to do is most of the listeners, I would suspect, are students or graduates in food science. And I'm going to say you're not going to be a behavioral psychologist overnight. but have an appetite and an interest in learning some of these behavioral science principles. The behavioral sciences are a science, just like food science. And I've seen the power of when we blend these two subject matter expertise areas, how you can get better results. So just a few tips that I would have, but just remember, at the end of the day, the job of a food safety professional, I believe very sincerely, is not to create a food safety program, but it's to create a food safety culture. And those two things are very different. When you create a program, people might do it when they're being held accountable, when the inspector arrives, when the boss is there.
When they're asked for information.
When you create a food safety culture, people should do it even when no one is looking.
Yeah. So in order to build a strong food safety culture and quality culture around the industry, we have to use the understanding not only on human behavior, and how we interact with each other, how we give importance to this topic, but also use tools that are available to us and combine them to strengthen all of this system, right? Now, talking about those tools, we have emerging technology is evolving extremely fast. We're having great technological advancements that are growing each day in a faster pace.
Yes.
Now, the technology adoption on the other side is taking so long to even understand what these new advancements can do and how we can integrate them. So as an industry, how can we work together? What can we do to close that gap between the fast pace of evolution in technology and the slow pace in the adoption?
Yeah, so another fabulous question. I'm a firm believer that we can add new tools to our toolbox. So even on culture, there are behavioral principles that you can add that are new tools to your toolbox. There's the behavioral principle of commitment. If you understand that, you can leverage it in your work. There's the behavioral science principle of the social norm. People will do what they see other people do. I published a book titled Food Safety with Behavior. I have 30 new tools, behavioral science tools that you could use in your work. But it goes beyond the tools of human behavior, right? You stated things are changing. The food system is changing at an accelerated pace. I've been saying for the past 3 years that we're in the midst of a food revolution. I've been working on food for 38 years. I do not believe that's an exaggeration in any way, shape, or form. We're in the midst of a food revolution. What do I mean by that? Right now, as we speak, there's companies all over the world reformulating foods so that they might be healthier, reduce sodium, try to reduce caloric intake, make them a little bit more nutritious. In addition to reformulating foods, right now, as we speak, there are new foods being developed. At FDA, I actually signed a memorandum of understanding with USDA, between the FDA, because we saw companies wanting to develop cell-cultured meat and poultry and seafood products, meaning they don't come from an animal. They come from bioamplifying cells. And these products are not far away. You're going to see some of these products start hitting the market in the next few years. There are new food production methods being devised that allow us to produce foods more sustainably, increase yields, minimize labor through automation. And we know that the food system is becoming increasingly digitized. And so what you're suggesting, and I believe in these rapid changing times with food, there will be some risks that we have to manage, but there will be a lot of benefits. And I view this as opportunities. But I think we're going to have to use more modern tools and more modern approaches in the future. And so the industry and the profession is going to have to change. We can't afford to create some type of digital divide with small and medium enterprises not being able to keep up with the big players. I know one of the reasons why these technological advancements aren't adopted as quickly, let's say, as they are in medicine or in travel or in entertainment, for example. And your listeners will know it too, because the margins tend to be small in food. But the cost of digitizing assets, whether they're food or food production facilities or whether they're equipment, that's going to happen. What can we do? I think we have to collaborate. And we can't use this as a competitive advantage. So as some companies figure out how to use technology and automation to create a better way, they should feel free to share those with others in their industry. The reality, when you're producing a certain product or commodity, you tend to win and lose together. You know, if there's a scare, everybody gets harmed. I think we have to demand of the technological solution providers that they develop what I call low cost, no cost technical solutions. So before we went on camera, we were talking about some of the technological revelations that have happened. Think about it. Most of them are on social media platforms.
Yep.
Can you pay any money to be on them?
I don't.
You don't pay a cent.
No.
That's because they've created economic models that allow people to get in a digital ecosystem, and they finance it, but you don't have to pay. And so we have to use those same types of we can digitize processes. Digitizing processes and information isn't anything new. I think the challenge will be, how do we create economic models to allow those solutions to scale? And then I would say another very important point is public and private collaboration. Oftentimes, the public sector does a lot of investment to incentivize, the private sector to be able to innovate. In the U.S., we've invested very heavily in what we call rural in the country broadband. So that if you're a farmer, you can access, I like to say, every farmer, every tool. And yes, they might want a tractor, they might want a hoe, but we know these digital devices will increasingly help them do their work. And so those are just some of the ideas to try to bridge this gap. But I think it's a new and very exciting future. And I think we have yet to see or even imagine how we're going to create a smarter, safer, and more sustainable food system that's going to generate, ample food to feed generations in a safer manner for years to come.
Right. It's a matter of working together, not only as people, not only as industry, but between private and public sector. You have great experience mixing them both. You know how to handle both. So this overview of the experience, the view that you have of the food industry, the knowledge that you can share with our audience here has been great. I thank you very much for this interview. I'm sure it will be for a lot of value for viewers.
My pleasure. Let me just close. It's a real pleasure to sit with you. I'm big fans of the work that you and your organization does. And I'm pro-global and pro-local. Latin America plays such a critical role in the 21st century food system. So thank you for providing more content, education, skills, and awareness with colleagues in Latin America. We're really counting on you. Future generations are counting on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Cool. One take.
Frank Yiannas is undoubtedly one of the most influential leaders in the food industry. This past April, at the Latin American Congress of Food Safety by Grupo Delcen, he gave a conference with key messages on the challenges of the food industry in a complex global environment. Here are some of them.
Some of the work you're doing is fantastic, and you have to keep it up, but you have to work differently. We're all going to have to work differently. And so that's the take-home message. I want you to go back to your places of employment and say, what we're doing today is not good enough. If you think you're going to do food safety tomorrow, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, the same way you're doing it today, you will lose. Some of your companies will be the companies that Joaquin uses on a slide on those headlines.
On this message, Frank challenges its listeners to work differently to ensure food safety. But he also speaks about the future of the industry.
The food system is becoming increasingly digitized. We are going to see more changes. This group here, you will see more changes in food in the next 10 years than I did in the 30 years that I've worked in it. The level of ag tech investment that's happening. We're in the midst of a food revolution. So that's the first mega trend that you have to be aware. Some of this will afford convenience and sustainability and options for consumers, but some of them will present new risk that each and every one of you are going to be working on managing.
We will keep posting exclusive content from Frank Yiannas in all of our social media, so don't miss out. The food revolution is now. So let's open the conversation. Let us know in the comments of this video what do you think are the drivers of the food revolution.